I'm Caleb Chapman with the Jazz Education Network, here with another installment of Beyond the Notes. And today I'm talking to my very good friend Dave Pietro, and he's got a brand new album out, New Road, Iowa Memoirs. And Dave, you were telling me that this album has a real heavy education story behind it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, in 2011 and 2012, I was hired by Hancher Auditorium at the University of Iowa to do 3 weeks of residencies, one in November of 2011, one in February, one in April. The residencies culminated in a concert in April, but I went all over the state of Iowa doing workshops and master classes at colleges and high schools. And I decided to document my travels with writing music about it. The first tune on the album is called Sunrise on the Muscatine Highway. We had 2 early morning workshops. We had to leave at 6 a.m. and drive from Iowa City to Muscatine because the jazz band met at 7 a.m. Like a lot of jazz bands,
Right.
they don't meet during the
normal
school
school
day.
day.
Right, so we were getting up in the darkness and driving along the road and got to see the sunrise along the Mississippi, and it was just beautiful, amazing. So that's where this inspiration came for that song, driving to a high school and for 7 a.m. big band rehearsal.
Mm-hmm. Kind of amazing where inspiration comes from.
Yeah.
Sometimes where we least expect it.
And the second tune came, it's called Sleep, Prairie, Sleep. I was driving in western Iowa up to Spencer, Iowa, which is really north, almost on the Minnesota border, in the middle of February, and all the fields were snow-covered, and it just was just sort of, I don't want to say bleak, it was really beautiful, but in a very, wintry kind of way. And so this melody came to me and I wrote it, and I was driving to another workshop.
Mm.
So it was really great. The students were amazing, and I had a great time.
Fantastic. How much does the education component, doing clinics, workshops, being a guest artist, how much of your time is spent, doing that during the year?
A lot of time. I mean, I'm a full-time professor at New York University, so obviously doing a lot of teaching there. But I've always, I was a music ed major at the University of North Texas. I played in the 1 o'clock band and did all the jazz stuff, but I was a music ed major, so I think I knew even in my teenage years that teaching was going to be an important part of what I do, because I really love teaching, and it's a very separate thing from being a player. There are a lot of players who can't really teach or prefer not to teach. It's a completely different discipline, but I've always said if I wasn't a musician, I would have been a psychologist. I really love to work with people and figure out what makes people tick, and teaching for me sort of combines those two passions. And I think it's particularly important these days because, jazz, I was thinking about this today about the Gen Conference, my feelings about it. Jazz is such a small percentage of the population in terms of who's into it and how many people listen to it, that it's really important to have conferences like this where we can stick together, because sometimes you're out there in the field and you feel like you're by yourself.
You're the only one.
You're the only one, and what's been really great for me every time I come to these conferences, not only hearing established musicians and up-and-coming musicians and beginning musicians and all of that, but just connecting with people who have that same passion, that same belief in the music and in the history of this music and in the future of this music. And it's sort of, you can just see everybody getting recharged, like, okay, I'm not alone, there are other people out there, and we have to stick together and work together as a family, really, to move this music that we love forward into the future.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned some of the benefits of coming to the conference. What are some of the things that what to you, what's the role of an organization like the Jazz Education Network outside of the conference? What do you see that brings to the jazz community?
Well, there are a number of aspects of what happened that I think are great. One is just I think professionals, I speak for myself, just reconnecting with colleagues. Again, to this thing of just maybe sharing ideas, or just it's like family, and we're in this together and we've shared this history together, and that's amazing. And then going and being inspired by some great performances, and then also connecting with the students. To be honest with you, one of my most gratifying moments I had at the conference this year was working with a community college band from Tyler and giving them a master class, and to share what I've learned and to see the inspiration on their faces, and when they come up and they're like, thank you, and you just see that they're so enthusiastic and so grateful for what you've done, that's really rewarding.
Fantastic. And one last question. You've been putting out such great music for so many years. I'm a huge fan of your music. How do we balance creating new music and a new songbook with honoring the music of our jazz legacy of the past? How do we balance those in education?
I thought a lot about this teaching at NYU, because my students are like, why do I need to learn this music? Even jazz studies majors, because they're listening to maybe more contemporary styles that aren't, that they don't see yet the connection to the past. And they're like, why do I need to learn standards? Why do I need to learn Louis Armstrong's music? Why do I need to do this? And there's basically two parts of that. One is, I've said I tell them, anyone who's ever taken the music into the future has always understood the past. If you listen to Stravinsky's First Symphony, it sounds like Rimsky-Korsakov. It doesn't sound like Rite of Spring.
Right.
It sounds like traditional Russian symphony. If you listen to early Ornette Coleman, it sounds like Bird, and on and on. You
can hear the roots.
You hear the roots. Yeah. If you listen to early Coltrane, especially when he was on alto, you hear you hear Bird, you hear all of that. So, without really understanding that, a lot of students, younger people can assume that these people just fell from the sky with their sound. They don't understand the connection, And the other aspect is, what I tell them is, look, what I'm essentially teaching you is process. Okay, I'm going to teach you, we're going to use jazz, your jazz studies majors, and we're going to use jazz to study melody, rhythm, harmony, orchestration, sound, all style, all of these things that go into any music, whether it's jazz or goth or whatever. It is particularly, each style has to have these processes. So what I tell them is, we're going to use jazz, we're going to study jazz, we're going to study the process of what makes great music, and then you can take that knowledge and go anywhere you want with it. If you know what makes a good melody, if you know about harmony, if you know how to play your instrument well, if you know how to orchestrate, if you're aware of all these things, then you can go in any direction. And the music that you're going to make is going to be substantive and it's going to be interesting.
Starts with the foundation.
Starts with the foundation. I really feel that's really what our job is, to teach a foundation. And we're using jazz as a way to teach that. You could also do that with classical. In some ways, jazz, because of the way the chords are notated and because of the harmonies used, it's in some ways a little more relevant to what's happening today.
Right.
But on this album are two melodies that I took from a Ravel string quartet. And I didn't have to change any of the harmonies. Ravel was using dominant 7 sharp 9s and sus chords and all that. I just had to, basically score down the score to a piano score, and just write out the chords, interpret them as I thought they were. But so there's stuff to be learned there too. So I think what I tell them is, I'm not teaching you this stuff so that you will go out and just spew the same thing out. If you choose to do that, there are some musicians who really, I had a student who really got into the Dixieland thing, and he ended up being a washboard player, and that's great. I'm not making a judgment whether you want to recreate music from the past, but what I think is we should be teaching principles that allow the students to make personal decisions about where they want to go with it, because their impulse and the time that they grow up, and Marcus Miller talked about this, about writing music for the time.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke to this in your speech. And so my feeling is we're going to teach the fundamentals and what makes great music, and then we'll leave the rest to the young people, and they'll do the rest because it's their time.
And they'll dictate the direction.
And they will dictate whatever, because whatever their influences are and whatever their interests are, they'll go the rest of the way.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that concept of teaching the process. And, you know, in education, any type of music education, that's really what it comes down to.
Fundamentals, yeah.
Is empowering the students to be able to do that.
Right.
So, once again, this is Dave Pietro. Be sure to check out his album, his newest album, New Road, Iowa Memoirs. And thanks for your time today, Dave.
Thanks, Caleb. Appreciate it.